All right, hello and welcome back. We are now 6 days to 10 years sober, and welcome back for the fifth episode. Gotta fix my bangs. Fifth episode of this little mini series on the Healing Happens podcast. I am Elsa, and as I make my way towards celebrating 10 years sober on May 3rd, I am sharing a little series on mini lessons, wisdom, gifts of sobriety, all of the things. So if you've missed the first 4 episodes, I highly encourage you to go back and watch them. But feel free to tune in here. They're all pretty separate and stand on their own. But for the full collection of wisdom, I encourage you to watch all 10 episodes at some point. If you know anyone in recovery who is struggling and needs some help, or anyone who is still in active addiction, I highly encourage you to share these episodes with them. It might give them some hope and inspiration. It also might help family members of people who are suffering from addiction, who are in the throes of it with them. So please subscribe to my channel. Follow it on their podcasting platforms, leave a review, leave comments, share it with your community. I really want to get the word out there about this. So today, I'm going to break down what I call the trauma model of addiction. And I'm also going to explain why all addictions are the same. And it really is a waste of time and a total mental exercise to try to make these big distinctions between different types of addiction. So I'll start from the very beginning. When I first got sober, I definitely believed that it was only certain types of substances that were the problem. So in my case, I was like, pills and hard drugs are the problem. I'll come in, I'll do the things, I'll stay completely sober for 1 year, and then I can start to drink and, smoke weed again, because those things aren't the problem. And I was extremely lucky to be in a facility that taught us about addiction. And then I was lucky to be part of a group, like a subgroup of AA, that really focused on the solution and the disease of alcoholism in the day that you're in versus, drunkalogs and war stories and all of that kind of stuff, and focus on the substances themselves. So, yeah, okay. So, trauma model of addiction and why all addictions are the same. So I'll never forget walking into my outpatient group one day. I had probably 90 days sober, and written on the board it said, alcoholism equals addiction. And this is one of my really big gripes with the program, of AA, is you do get certain groups, and especially people of the older generation, who are very pure about the substances specifically. And I believe that is a distraction from the real problem, and it turns people away who need help. But I was really taught early on that the substance doesn't matter. It's the compulsion, it's the addictive behavior, it's the way that you consume, it's the reward system in the brain, it's the dopamine hit that you're chasing, all of that kind of stuff. And it is incredibly common for people who get sober to develop other addictions. I mean, if you go to any rehab center or any AA meeting, people are smoking or vaping like crazy. They are chugging coffee 24/7. And those are just the more, apparent and socially acceptable and publicly acceptable addictions. There's tons of cake and candy and sweets and all that kind of stuff at meetings often too. And so when people first get sober, I don't necessarily know if it's talked about enough that drugs and alcohol are not the problem. Drugs and alcohol truly are the solution to the problem, which is pain, most likely caused by early childhood trauma. So another thing that I want to clear up is this belief that addiction or alcoholism is genetic. That is a narrative that is promoted a lot in all addiction communities. And that's kind of the dominant medical narrative as well. So, if you have a parent or a grandparent or siblings who, suffer from addiction, it's likely that you will too. And this argument is used for a lot of other things too. It's not just addiction, like mental health issues are often said to run in families and things like this. But there are two different ways of looking at it runs in the family. There is the biological genetic framework, which is what the dominant Western medical community preaches. And then there is the lens of intergenerational trauma and maladaptive patterns that get passed down through generations in families, because unless one person in that family decides to actually really get in there and heal, they will subconsciously repeat the toxic patterns of their childhood despite their best conscious intentions not to. So I used to really buy into this whole I was born an alcoholic narrative. When I first came into AA, I was like, all right, yeah, for sure. Like, I was born an alcoholic. I've always been this way. It's never going to change, blah, 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 blah. But the interesting thing about that is that it really doesn't run in my family. So I always thought that was a little weird, but I was like, okay, whatever, maybe that's the case. But what I have come to believe through years of extensive research and study and my own experience is that addiction is a solution and a coping mechanism and a way of self-soothing if we have experienced severe nervous system dysregulation as a result of early childhood trauma. And the main researcher in this field is Gabor Mate. I bring him up very often on this podcast because he has been one of my greatest inspirations on my path, both in addiction recovery and just trauma healing in general. And I feel I owe him such a debt of gratitude because his way of looking at the world and his teachings and his framework have freed me on so many levels and really given me the power back on my healing journey, both from addiction and from mental illness. So, if you are interested in this topic, 10 out of 10 recommend reading Gabor Mate's book In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, Close Encounters with Addiction. He actually worked on basically the Skid Row of Vancouver, Canada, and he was working with very low bottom alcoholics and addicts, like people who are probably never going to get sober and had severe trauma. And it's important to remember that trauma is not just the things that should not have happened that happened, like severe neglect, physical abuse, sexual abuse, things like this. Especially when it comes to addiction, it is often the things that should have happened that did not happen. So having a mother who was able to co-regulate and pass on healthy nervous system regulation to you. Having a secure attachment, all of these things developmentally really impact a child and make a child susceptible to self-soothing through addiction. And one of my favorite Gabor Mate quotes ever is, "You should never ask why the addiction, but why the pain." And that one just always hits me right in the heart, because that truly is my experience with addiction. I had this unbearable pain inside of me that I could not even fathom feeling. And so I kept myself numb through drugs and alcohol, through self-harming, through an eating disorder, through sex and men and validation, through shopping, through constant busyness and overworking and productivity. And this is another thing that I absolutely love about Gabor Mate, is that he is very clear that so many more people are addicts, truly, than we think, but they may have an addiction that is accepted by society. So he actually uses himself as an example, and he talks about being the overachieving workaholic doctor, but he's praised by society for that. He also has this weird kind of, probably never heard this one before, addiction to shopping for classical music CDs. But it's to the point where he literally cannot resist steering the car into the music store on the way home. He lies to his wife about it. He spends too much money. He will miss important events in his child's lives because he, has to go to the music store and spend hours finding the latest new rare recording. And so he's not outcast by society because his addiction doesn't look like, shooting up in an alley. But it comes from the same source. It comes from a pain inside that is too overwhelming for our system, that we are unable to process and feel. And so we have to numb and escape somehow. So, with that being said, all addiction is the same. And the solution is also the same, which is healing that early childhood trauma, healing that pain inside of you, so you no longer have to run away, numb out, or escape. And this is where I believe the 12 steps fall very short. I want to make it very clear that I think the program is amazing. I think it is incredible that any alcoholic anywhere who wants help has a place to go for free to receive help. And many people get sober successfully, completely for free in AA, and I think that is wonderful. And I am infinitely grateful that my journey of recovery and healing started in AA, because there is a level of accountability and self-responsibility that we are taught there, and a level of freedom and spirituality that is taught there that I haven't really found anywhere else, and that I think is very important. However, we talk about outside help in the program, and I firmly believe that every single person who has struggled with addiction needs outside help, because they clearly have unprocessed trauma, a dysregulated nervous system, and a pain inside of them that they cannot bear to face. And I don't believe that it is possible to be sober long term and be happy, joyous, free, thriving, and free from addictions of all kinds without addressing the root cause, which is the trauma. And so for me personally, I have done a lot of healing over the last nearly 10 years. And when I began my somatic healing journey is when things really started to change for me in recovery, and I was able to heal mental illness, and it was incredible. Get off psych meds, all that kind of stuff. But what I've realized recently is that I have 2 addictions that up until the last year or so, I have not been willing to give up. And because I have allowed myself to continue to participate in these 2 addictions, I have still been avoiding this core pain, this feeling inside of me, that this void that literally feels like it could swallow me whole. I've been avoiding feeling and therefore processing and resolving this, which has kept me stuck in the cycle of addiction, even with 10 years sober from drugs and alcohol. Which is why I made the distinction yesterday between being sober and being in recovery. Yeah, you can be sober, but you can have so many other addictions and still be totally avoiding life. And so I want to bring this up, and I want to get honest about it, because in my case, it has been sex, men, validation. That kind of goes in one category. It's like an addiction all wrapped up in itself. And then there is the overachieving, constant busyness, inability to slow down, total avoidance of stillness, and the addiction to, accolades, and you're being a good girl, you're doing a good job, look at all you're doing, look at all you're achieving. And these 2 addictions have prevented me from pausing, slowing down, and creating enough space around this void, painful, intense feeling that I've been running from since I was 9 years old, and I've engaged in my first addictive behavior, which in my case was self-harm. And in a somatic experiencing session recently, I was able to actually go back and identify from a sensation-based perspective, holy shit, this is the feeling that preceded all of those addictive behaviors. This is the feeling that comes up as soon as I start to slow down. This is the feeling that makes me compulsively engage in these addictive behaviors still. And so, of course, I am proud AF of having almost 10 years sober, almost 9 years free from all nicotine, 7 years off of psych meds. It's been a long time since I was actively participating in my eating disorder. But there is still more to go for. And as long as there are any addictive or compulsive behaviors present, there is an avoidance of the underlying pain. And so it's all the same. The root cause is all the same, and the solution is the same, which is to create time and space to slow down, to feel the pain a little bit at a time, in a titrated way, in a safe environment. I am choosing to process that through somatic experiencing on my own journey right now. And that is why I am so passionate about sharing somatic experiencing with others as well, because it really works. And the more that I have been able to sit with that feeling and prove to myself that it will not swallow me whole, and that I can sit with it and feel it and be okay, and I can hold myself through that, and my body and my system shows me that it can regulate through that, the more that I practice that, the more confidence I have, and the less I need those other addictive behaviors. They simply fall away as we heal. And so yes, of course, abstinence is very important at the beginning. You know, I've taken most of the last 18 months to be celibate, you know. At the beginning of addiction recovery, of course, abstinence from whatever substance, etc., is important. But with a lot of other addictions, like things like sex and like food, these are important parts of a healthy life. You know, we have to eat every day to survive. Sex is a big part of a healthy, fulfilled, thriving life. And so with these behaviors, it can be even harder because we can't just put the tiger in the cage. We have to take the tiger out of the cage with eating, you know, multiple times a day. And so healing the underlying cause of addiction will allow us to integrate these behaviors into our life in a healthy, beautiful way. So don't get it twisted. Whether it's video games, classical music CDs, sex, food, drugs, and alcohol, the root cause of all addictions is the same. It is to numb the pain we cannot face and feel, and it is a result of early childhood trauma most of the time. And so the solution, once we are abstinent, is to go within and feel and heal. So I'm really excited to share this take on addiction because I think it is incredibly important. And it has been the key to me actually thriving in recovery. So thank you so much. I will see you tomorrow. I'm excited to continue this series and be on this journey with you. Sending you all my love. If you have any questions, comments, anything you want to chat about, please leave it in the comment section of the YouTube video. You can also reach out in my DMs on social media. I would love to talk about all of this with you. Share this with anyone you think might benefit from this information. Anyone that may feel stuck or stagnant or just not happy and fulfilled, even if they are sober, this might be the missing piece for them. So spread the wealth of knowledge with your community. Sending you all my love.